Okay.
I'm Lauren
Now,
Ian Hamer, and it's another week of Torn, and I'm glad that we have a Torn panel this week, and Juan was able to host it and moderate it again because there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot in the news. So I'm going to leave you to it. As always, put your questions or comments in the Facebook chat on RDU on stage, and Juan will see them and get them to the panel. And thank you all for doing this. This is a good group tonight. So thank you all. Thank you, Juan. And I'll see you later.
I thought you were
Oh,
staying
Lauren,
on,
leave.
Lauren. Yeah, I thought, Lauren, I thought you were going to be up here with us tonight, but okay, never mind. Fine.
Frankly, it'll be easier because every time you say Lauren, I get confused. Oh, she's back.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, but she's not talking.
Am I supposed to stay on tonight?
Does anyone else remember in the instant message where she asked could she be on the show? Was it her to ask could she be on with us? Who asked? Maybe it was the other Lauren. Ooh. Okay. I probably should not, don't y'all tell my mama, I know she's looking. I probably shouldn't smoke that stuff before we do a show. Anyway, I'm joking, y'all. For the ones watching, I don't indulge in stuff like that. All right, Lauren left. Y'all know I'm special other. So we are doing, I'm trying to get to I lost it. Y'all, I'm not fond of new Facebook. It's really not it's not my friend. It's not. I'm trying to bring up the page on Torn so that I can see the comments. And I don't see where that is. Events, home. Anyway, hello everybody. I'm gonna figure that out while we talk. So I have some more theater friends here. I've worked with everybody. Thank you, Lauren. I've worked with everybody up here, which is, I do want some people that I haven't worked with, but I can't get in contact with them. So if there's anybody out there that watches this that you want to be on the show, then let Lauren or myself know. But this is another episode of Torn. So I'm gonna go ahead and ask the first question. I always gotta make sure I ask it right. Danny is a repeat offender. This is her second time being on. So you answer this question last. So okay. I want to know your nationality. And by the way, I'm gonna call names. I want to know your nationality, what you do in theater, and where you are from originally. Where from? So let's start with Heather.
I am American. I am the executive director at Raleigh Little Theater, and I am originally from upstate New York.
Okay, thank you. Miss Knott?
Yeah, hi. I'm also American. What do I do in theater? I act and I dress sometimes, and I sometimes work backstage. And I'm originally from Durham.
Okay. Matthew?
I am American, and I am primarily an actor, but also run a theater company called Aggregate Theater Company and write things for them, including musicals. And then I was born in Louisville, Kentucky, but really grew up in Mount Airy, North Carolina.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Campbell, Lou Campbell?
Hello, you can hear me, right?
Yes, sir.
African American. I mainly act theater, and I grew up, I'm an Air Force brat, and I've been all over the country, so, but I grew up in Anchorage, Alaska.
Okay. Thank you, sir. And Miss Barber?
Well, I am American, but I'm African American. And what I do in theater is I'm an actress, a vocalist. I also house manage. I do some marketing things, a variety of stuff. I'm a volunteer extraordinaire, and I'm originally from Charlotte.
Okay. Thank you. And Miss Danny.
Hi, I am 100% Panamanian. 100%. I am an actor. I am a singer. I also work backstage in theater, done marketing and graphic design for JTP in the past. And I was born in Panama.
Okay, thank you. Now, hold on. I'm sorry. Let me turn that off. Okay, there we go. Now, a lot of y'all have seen the show before, and so you kind of knew what the answer. Well, not the answer. Excuse me. There's no wrong answers, but you knew what to say. Only one person, and that gentleman has never seen the show. I asked that because nationality is the nation that you're from. And Maria did say, she said she's African American, but you were born in America. And I tell people that because I did an episode with younger actors, children. And I told them that if anyone asked them, what's your nationality? The only thing they have to say is American, because that's the nation you were born in. You don't have to say anything else. They can look at you and assume, but you don't have to say. Most of the time, someone who is white says American. Most of the time, someone who is Black says African American. But if you were born in this country, why would you have to put a label in front of American? It's the programming that we feel like we have to have that label up there, but we don't. You are an American. It's your choice to give your heritage, but your nationality is American. Somebody from Mexico, their nationality is American, because when you were in school, were we not taught that there are 3 countries in North America? So this is the United States of America. Of is the important word in that statement. This is not United States only America. It's United States of America. So that is the only specific question that I asked. I will ask this though. We are all different in some way. It does not have to be race. We all have differences. Growing up, when did you first learn that you were different than someone else? Like, growing up in your house, your mom and your dad, if you had mom and dad or brothers and sisters, they all, for the most part, looked like you. But when was your first experience seeing someone that didn't? And what was that like for you? I'll start with Lauren.
I need more time to think. Oh God.
Okay, we can come back. We can come back. Matthew, this ain't formal. Matthew, go ahead.
I'm trying to remember myself. I guess I don't remember it being a very distinct experience then, but I do have a memory of during elementary school. This is when I was still in Louisville, of going and taking swimming lessons at the JCC, and knowing that this isn't race or nationality, but just growing up Baptist and then going to the Jewish Community Center, I knew that like it was a separate community establishment I was going to, but there was no, I was an outsider in that case, but that was something where I realized, because I saw some of my friends I went to school with, that's where they went after school. And so that was an experience of knowing that they were part of a different community than I was outside of the school time.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Campbell. You're on now. Yeah.
Well, I like to start off with your first question, then I'll go into the other question. And, and I think you hit on the point a little bit. If people choose to say who they are or where they're from or how they, you know, want to be called. And that's one of the things I learned in theater, which was really eye-opening to me, because they kept asking the person, what gender do you want to be? Or what is the statement when they say, what would you like to be called? Him, her, he?
Pronouns.
Yeah.
Pronouns.
Yeah. What does that
Yeah,
mean?
pronoun.
Preferred pronouns.
Your preferred pronoun. So if somebody chooses to be called African American, or if somebody wants to, you know, start off with their heritage or who they're from, that's their choice. Doesn't mean they're less American. It doesn't mean that they are not American. And so I just wanted to not challenge your statement, but just to comment on your statement, that it comes across that if someone does that, they're less American. And that is, you know, I wouldn't say that. I, you know, served in the military, love my country just as much as anybody that wants to call themselves Indian American or national, whatever they want to call themselves, whatever pronoun they give themselves. So now for me, when I was growing up, for me, you know, I kind of realized that I was somewhat different, because in North Carolina, when we used to come home, my family used to take us to a beach. I think it was called Atlantic Beach or some beach. And I just remember that, you know, I never saw anybody of different race. I just thought it was kind of odd. I never seen other young people that were of different race or colors or whatever at that beach. I just remember, you know, that distinctly, because in the military, growing up in a military environment, there were just so many different cultures and so many different people. But when we went back home to visit, I noticed that it was, you know, just a certain group of people. And that's when I knew that there was something different being Black and growing up. Yep.
Okay, thank you. Heather?
So upstate New York, I grew up in a farming community, which was very white. I moved to Florida when I was 9 years old, and was in a community with a lot more diversity. But the first time that I remember really understanding that there was feelings about the differences was I was waiting after school with two of my friends, and one other white little girl and one Black little girl. And one of our friends' mom was coming to pick me and her up, the two white little girls. And then she came, and we were standing outside all talking to each other before, and she came and she picked up the two of us, and we got in the car, and my friend's mother made a comment about who we were hanging out with. And I was really confused. I didn't understand why that comment was made. And I didn't understand it for many years, but I reflect back on that moment because I was so caught about what that moment meant, because I knew it meant something that I didn't fully understand and fully didn't agree with, but I reflect on that moment and understand what it meant now.
Oh, okay, thank you. Was it a racial slur?
Oh, it wasn't a slur, but there was a comment on, you should watch the people you're hanging around with, which meant that we weren't allowed to be hanging out.
Okay, thank you. Lauren, you got something?
Yeah, something Lou said actually triggered it in my mind. Is when you were first talking about it, I was thinking about elementary school. I remember having a fairly diverse, for North Carolina, for where I was at the time, elementary school class. But the first time I remember seeing someone and like really thinking that they were different than me was in kindergarten. The very first day walking through the cafeteria, there was a young girl with albinism. And I just remember thinking how strange it was that there was someone as pale as I was with this bright yellow, looking back, beautiful hair. And I just thought about how odd it was. I just saw her walking and I was like, oh, that is so interesting. I have never seen someone who looks like that before. And she later, we weren't in the same class that year, but we were a few years later and we became really good friends. And I still see her on Facebook to this day. We don't talk anymore, but I think that's the first time I looked at somebody and was like, that person's different than me. Interesting, weird.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Maria.
I was thinking about a couple of experiences. I think when I really realized it, I mean, I always knew that our shades were different, but I think it really became an issue. Well, not an issue, but I really thought about it when I was about 7 years old. And I had a best friend who was actually a Caucasian little boy. And I remember saying, I don't know if you can come to my house. I don't know about this because it was new, because everybody I knew was Black, of course. But I actually remember going to his house and being welcomed there in elementary school. But as I got to, that was probably like first grade, I think, first or second grade. But I remember in fourth grade noticing that my neighborhood was all Black people, but when I went to school, there was more diversity. So it was odd to me that there were no white people in my neighborhood, not realizing, hello, ma'am, you live in the projects. There, you may not see any. So it was interesting.
Okay. Thank you. Danny?
Yeah, I think before when we had this question, I kind of had to give a broad statement because growing up in Miami is a whole different reality. I was surrounded by people who look like me, who spoke Spanish, lots of immigrants, me being an immigrant myself. But I think what kind of did it for me at that point, that I wasn't the majority at that point in my life, maybe I think second grade when they put me in English as a second language, and I was like, I don't need this, and it was like all brown kids, in the class, and I was like, I've been here since I was 2. I was like, why are they sticking me in here? So that kind of made me realize, hey, I maybe I'm the one that doesn't belong here, I was like, what is going on? So yeah, that was an interesting experience for me.
You something you just said. So did you ever find out why they put you in that class?
No, and I still to this day I can't remember why they the teachers or whatever. I don't know if there was tester involved or they just decided she's an immigrant. She's just stick her in that class. To this day I have no idea. I don't even think my parents. They were just like, just go with whatever the school says type of thing, unless something really went wrong. And then they were very vocal about that, but it was never challenged by them.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. That's interesting. Very interesting. So we might as well get into it this week. Jacob Blake. And Torn was started because of the George Floyd situation. And here we are 2 months later, 2+ months later, actually 3 months later. And we're here again. So, Lauren, what are your thoughts on what you've been seeing in the news?
Oh, yeah. I think how do you begin? How do you articulate any thoughts? I think the thing that's been really striking for me that has just been reiterated again and again and again is how people, the sort of like white conservative or white moderate will be like, well, look at these people's criminal background. George Floyd had such and such drug in his system. And also he had these assault charges, and oh, this person had a warrant out for their arrest. And I just find that tactic so infuriating, because a cop does not know about a person's criminal history when they see them on the street. So how are we, after they have been brutally murdered for seemingly no reason, going like, oh, well, they had an assault charge from 2001, so like they deserved to die. It's fine that they were killed. The cop was justified. Like the cop did not know that in the second. So I think that's what came to mind first. But I don't know what to do anymore. It's exhausting. I'm exhausted, and I'm a white lady who can turn off the news and not like live the experience of fear and rage and uncertainty that I think Black people have to experience every single day. And so, you know, it's starting to feel hopeless, but we can't not have hope, because then we can't affect the change that needs to happen. So I'm just sitting with all of that every day, which is not ideal, but that's where my head's at.
This one time, I'm gonna segregate this, the responses. So Heather, same question.
Yeah. I am growing increasingly angry with trying to understand how many times this has to happen before everyone can't see that this isn't an isolated incident, that this isn't an accident, that this isn't a coincidence, this is systematic. This is a massive issue with the system. And, you know, this time we have the very stark counter image of a young white man with an assault rifle walking through without any issues. I mean, we have so many examples of these huge issues of implicit bias and systematic racism, and yet we still can't acknowledge that this is something that we have to do something about. And then on top of that, we have this immediate contrast this time with a white man with an assault rifle, and we still don't see the amazing inequity. I'm glad that the response has changed. I'm glad that there are protests and there is an increasing rage when these things happen. But when is the time that we have reached a tipping point where real change can happen and something can be done about this?
Thank you. Matthew, same question.
Yeah. I think something that has struck me this time, has, especially in stark contrast to the RNC, you know, speaking each night as well, is just the power of fear as a motivator to craft a message, and I think how discouraging it is to speak to those baser instincts. So I don't know. I feel discouraged by it. Kind of to what Lauren was saying of how you can see something that seems so obvious of what it is, and then it gets discounted by something as trivial or unknown at the time as what someone has in their car, and then that is, you know, magnified into a message that's as old as this country, into what that must mean and how you will suffer if you don't follow us and follow our message. And so I guess part of me is feeling helpless. I am encouraged seeing what's happening, with NBA, and then other sports following suit, having people step, using their platform more aggressively than maybe they felt able to do in the past, and seeing it more widely embraced than Colin Kaepernick several years ago, who was ostracized for doing the same thing. I'm not even doing something as big as not playing a game. So I see some encouragement there. I am at a loss to know how people are going to talk to each other. And so I think at a loss is probably the overwhelming feeling.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Danny?
Well, just like the others, it's just gotten to the point where it kind of, there is no kettle, there is no water left for me. I'm just, I can't, there are no words to even just say anymore, because it's so, I'm just enraged that this is happening, that African Americans are being targeted systematically. And I'm just at a loss as to what's going to get done, because I mean, the people are out there, they're making their voices heard, but until we really change who's in power, I don't think that's really gonna tip. Racism, unfortunately, has grown, like Matthew said, has been a part of the US in many ways, toward immigrants, anybody who was different other than white, other than what the founding fathers looked like, they were not welcome. Even though they were made to feel welcome, they were not. They were not included in the laws. So it's just something that's historically been, I guess, embedded in each generation. And how, I guess, I keep thinking, how do we come to terms with that? It's for 400 years in the making. How do you begin to even change something that's so pervasively ingrained in each generation? How do you come to terms with that? And honestly, I think unless we change the people who are in power, I really think that we're not going to affect change, because all these police officers are running around, when they should not be running around freely. They should be held accountable for their acts, because if it was one of us doing that, we would be locked up in 5 minutes. There is no, they're not being held accountable. So yeah, that's feeling.
Thank you. Okay. Maria?
Well, I've been thinking about this a lot today, because I figured, that's what we're here for. So first, I want to say that I am not hopeless. One, because this is something that our community has been facing for a long time, and we've proven to be resilient survivors. We bounce back. I'm also not hopeless because now the eyes of others are open. Like, the things that we've known have been happening all along, the rest of the world is now paying attention to. So that gives me hope that regardless of who is in power, the conversations at the kitchen tables may change. The children coming up may see, hey, there's something not right about this. So that gives me hope for the future. I will say that I am frustrated. I don't have children, but I have said numerous times that I am glad that I do not have to raise any in this current environment. And I worry about my nephews and my cousins and my brothers, who, regardless of how good they are according to society standards, whether they wear their pants where they need to be, or, you know, they get all the education that they're supposed to get, have the white collar job, all the things that society says makes you successful, regardless of what they do, somebody can decide just because of the color of their skin that they don't deserve to live. So that's the frustrating piece. But I'm grateful for the conversations that are happening, because I think that's where things start, is acknowledging that there is a problem. And then for the people who are connected to really work to impact change. So I'm not hopeless, frustrated, yes. But I'm optimistic that possibly, you know, our future isn't in total jeopardy because of people like the people serving on this panel. So.
Okay, thank you. Lou? Turn the mic on. There you go.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just, you know, I didn't see the clips. I've heard about it, you know. This has been a common thing, I think, that a lot of non-white people have experienced, you know, all over the world. It's a system that has been, you know, put in place. You know, I was reading a book today talking about being Black or being non-white. And when you're born in a prison when you're non-white. And so when you're born in that prison, you know, the laws and things that are in place aren't there for you. It's there for those in power. And so, you know, it's good that the truth is coming out. It's good that Matthews and Heathers and the people that are on this panel are now seeing the truth that I think that a lot of non-white people have been exposed to throughout the world. And that's why we see a lot of people rising throughout the world. This is just not an American thing, a 400-year thing. This is a 2,000-year type thing. And so to see that young man snuffed out and to see all these young Black men snuffed out, that's what we're born into. This is what we're in. But now the truth is out there. I think it's out there more than I ever seen before. And you got people like that are on this panel to piggyback on what Maria said. Now that we see the truth, how can we work together to change it? To change a system that's been put in place for thousands of years. So, and that's going to be hard to change. I remember, you know, speaking about, you know, when I was a young man growing up, you know, even though my father was in the military, we used to go home a lot. One of the things that I thought when I was coming up is I was going to go to jail. At some point in time, I'm supposed to go to jail. That's what an African American male is supposed to do. That's what they're going to learn as they go forward. You know, because I've seen all my cousins, I've seen all my family, I've seen everybody in jail. I see it on TV. So this system is a very powerful system that's been working for a long time. So to see the truth coming out, to see these things happening, it's unfortunate. And it's been going on for so long, but now the truth is out there. And so what are we going to do to change it? Because I don't think the people in power, people that are in positions, you know, they need our help. They need our help to make that change. And so, you know, that's what I see.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Wow. So let me ask you guys about protests. We've seen how they start when the sun is up. We've seen how they end up once the sun goes down. And this is again for everybody, and we'll go around. Do you think the protests are successful, and why? Start with you, Maria.
You would start with me first. I have mixed thoughts about the protest. I think definitely, I think people have a right to stand up for what they believe and express those things. I think a good purpose is that they do garner the attention that people are looking for, because a lot of times people are protesting because they want to be heard, you know. But I'm not really sure about how impactful they are. Once you put your sign down and go home, what happens next? You know. So I I'm more of focusing on the inner workings of a thing. Um, I just don't know how effective they are. I think again, you get the social media attention, but if somebody with the alternative motive for what, I can't think of the right word, but somebody who's not on the same page as you comes in and destroys the beauty of a protest, then it causes the overall impact to be reduced. So, I'm not against protests. It's just not my forte, because I'm just not sure if at the end of the day it did what the people wanted it to do.
Okay, thank you. Matthew, same question.
I think my simple answer would be yes. I think they're effective, but of course, we're in a world where there are counter protests. There's manipulation of a message. There's it takes so much discipline to get a mass of people to stay to a single voice and single action. And I think it can be expected that people vary from there, and then and the message gets diluted. But that's not to say I think the exposure of a message is lasting. My now deceased grandfather, who's 85 or was 85, asked me about the protest, talked to me about the protests, because he saw them on the news, and I hate all the destruction that happened downtown, but what other, physical manifestation of so much other, of internal destruction, systemic destruction, and it brought about conversation, and I think that's a good thing, even if it wasn't the most efficient, effective way a protest could have been done, it doesn't mean that it didn't accomplish anything or can't continue to accomplish things, even when the signs stop coming out again. I think there are images from the first night of protests I will never forget, watching on TV and just realizing, there's just realizing the reality of things, and sometimes that takes things not being, perfectly done, to realize that.
Okay, thank you. Lou.
I agree with everything that Matthew said there. Just to piggyback on, what he said, that sometimes they can be a little messy, but the message is out there. It might be a little ineffective the way it was done in some parts of the country, but it has brought attention to a problem that's been out there for a while. So, yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Now, I was wondering where she was. Mama's watching. Mama Helen's watching, Maria. So her comment was, protests are more successful if they are not violent. So the other three people, starting with Lauren, what are your thoughts on my mom's comment?
That protests are more effective if they're not violent.
Mm-hmm. Do you agree with that, Lauren? And why? If you do, why? If you don't, why?
Sure. I think I would agree. Protests are more effective if they're not violent, simply because if there is violence, if there is destruction and looting, then that gives the opposition something to fixate on that destroys or dilutes the intended message. I am not a person who says, oh, well, they, broke that storefront, and so the whole protest is meaningless. I think rage and destruction in a society that was built on the backs, literally, of your ancestors. Frankly, if you want to burn it down, I'm not mad about that. I'm very far left in that regard. But I do agree that when I talk to, my older conservative white family members, that if a protest has happened and some destruction, some violence has happened, then they're like, well, these hoodlums are out in the street, just like fighting and just wanting to make noise and hurt things, and they're not thinking about the actual message. But I've been to some protests in my time. I've never been to any protests that have turned violent, despite my planning for them to do so. And they have been some of the most together, the most unified I have felt with other people in my entire life. There's something about feeling the mass of all of the people around you sort of united by this common anger, but also like desire for your society, for your community to be better. Like something about that is so fulfilling to be a part of. And so scary. It's definitely scary, but I recommend everybody goes to a protest at least once, especially white people, because I think it's important to see all kinds of people at protests. And I think it's important to know that you are looked at differently at a protest as a white person, and you can use that privilege to protect other people. I would never start violence at a protest, but I'm not going to fault anyone for how their anger and frustration at years and years and years in a lifetime of systemic oppression, how that manifests. Like, I don't feel like that's on me to judge.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Danny, same question. Are protests more successful when they're violent? And whatever your response is, why?
Yes, I do think that the protests are more successful if they're nonviolent. If we look back in American history, back to the 50s and 60s with the Civil War, the Civil Rights movement, they were intentionally made, everybody was made to understand that they were protesting against this oppression, and they had to do it in a pacific way in order to get results. So I think that sometimes it doesn't happen that way. A lot of the protests have gotten out of hand, the ones now, because there have been people who have infiltrated the protests and started the fires, and we learned about that. It wasn't the protesters, it was the police. So with so many people gathering, you also don't know who's there and what their priorities are or what their real intentions are. So to mar, are they here to mar this, or are they really here with us marching, so our voice gets heard? And I think people have the right to protest, peacefully. But I guess to some of Lauren's points, if somebody starts a fight with me, or they hit me or something, or I see somebody, on the ground getting hurt, I'm gonna intervene. And whether that's considered violence or not, whether I'm protecting myself or somebody else, at that point, it's like, I need to do what I need to do for myself and that other person. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Heather, did you want to answer that, or you did? Okay, go ahead.
I think, you know, one of the hard things about the fight for justice is so often you have to create a message that is trying to dismantle a system that yet still speaks to the system you're trying to dismantle. And I know this because for many years of my life, that was my job. I walked the halls of the General Assembly. I pitched new policy to lawmakers, and my whole job was based on crafting messages that were palpable for lawmakers. And I struggled with that. I struggled with my own values with that. Many times it felt like I was making personal compromises to do that job, and I struggled with it. And part of what helped me understand the benefit of me doing that was understanding the full spectrum of the fight for justice. Because I had my role, and that was to carry better policy, new policy, improved policy, and put it in front of lawmakers that could actually vote on that policy. And I had to do that in a way that was effective for me to do it. But I also needed, in order to put the pressure on the lawmakers to even let me enter that door, I needed a public outcry that was creating pressure so that those doors were open for me. I needed protesters that were demanding change so that I had that door opened to me for a new conversation. And so I think that in this, what will hopefully be a revolution, we have to figure out how we respect everyone's way of fighting for justice. And this way of trying to speak to the system that we're dismantling, like, it doesn't work anymore. We've been doing that for a long time when it comes to racial inequity. And it's not the change that needs to happen. And so maybe it is time to speak with messages that are not palpable to all of us, especially white people. Maybe we need messages that are pushing for something stronger. Maybe we need for things to be destroyed so that somebody will finally listen. And that's not to say that this way is better than this way. We need all of these ways. We need all of these humans. We need the folks that are working at the General Assembly. We need the lawyers. We need the protesters. We need the rage and the anger, because all of those things working together is how a system changes. And throughout history, the start of every revolution is marked with the toppling of statues. If you look at where revolution is, it starts with the toppling of statues. And that's what we're seeing. And that's what these protests are doing. And sometimes that's the violence of these protests. So I think the question is, you know, successful at doing what? But there's got to be a much more comprehensive look at what are we trying to accomplish. And that's one way, that is one lane of getting to what needs to be done.
Okay, thank you. That like a light bulb went off when you said all revolutions start with the toppling of a statue. I started thinking back, and I'm like, wow, she's got a point. That's Maria. That right there. That's some good stuff right there. That's some good stuff right there. Wow. So my big brother mentioned about protests being sabotaged. So this one, I'm only going to let one person respond. Whoever raises their hand first. I don't know, like we in elementary school, right? Do you have a thought on how to not have a protest be sabotaged? Or what plan do you think would work to not have the sabotage. Because like with the Minnesota, with the first Minnesota protests, there was a video footage of a young white man who broke the windows out of, I guess, an AutoZone. And first they said he was a policeman, then they said he was a KKK member, and then they said he was both. So it was done intentionally. Look at Lauren's face. Lauren's like, it was done intentionally to start some trouble. So does anyone have an idea of how you keep that from happening?
I mean,
I'll just say
I
something
don't.
real quick. Oh, go ahead. No.
No, you go ahead, baby. Go.
Okay, both of y'all turned off. Lauren, you go. Since both, I'm gonna let both of you talk. I shouldn't. I
You both
know I
muted
should have
at the
just
same
gave you.
time.
These are actors. You don't give them random stuff to just talk. They are
Oh, no, I
somebody.
talk.
Right. Okay, go ahead, Lauren. You first, and then Luke.
I frankly, I don't think that's the most like salient issue in the discussion of protests, because I think it's disingenuous to assume that all violence and destruction in protests is like white infiltrators or like cop infiltrators trying to start stuff. That happens, and that's a problem, but that's not something that we can control as protesters. I mean, I'm open to suggestions, but I think when those things come to light, those speak much more strongly against the cops infiltrating and starting shit and the shitty KKK members who are actively trying to dismantle the movement. Like, that says a lot of bad shit about them. But I don't think they are the only ones destroying things or looting or invoking violence. And so I think we like for protests to be palatable. And so we want to say, well, all of the protesters were there and we were all singing Kumbaya and we were chanting and holding our signs, but that's just not the reality. I mean, I've seen some people talking, and I'm sure I'm quoting things poorly, but where people say, you know, Colin Kaepernick was kneeling peacefully and it didn't do anything and y'all were mad about that. So like, how do you want us to protest in a way that is going to impact meaningful change? So people standing across a highway and stopping traffic, that's not acceptable. Any of these ways that we're trying to protest are not seen as acceptable. So I think the quote is like, well, at first I asked you nicely and then I yelled and then I screamed, and like, you still were killing me. You're still, you know, doing the things that are, you're still murdering Black people. I mean, that's it at its core. So like, a natural progression of that is violence. So that kind of tangentially went to your point, but that was something that was on my heart.
Thank you. Okay, I appreciate it. Luke?
I just want to kind of that question. Am I on mute still? Oh no.
No,
okay.
we
No, I think that question kind of, you know, listen to Heather speak about, you know, strategies that she had to make in the where she worked at in the courthouse. I just said some of those things are done in a negative way too, to have those strategies to open up those doors or to keep that message going. You know, it kind of speaks to those infiltrators and those people that do things in order to open their doors and keep their message going as well. But yeah, I just kind of heard that Heather kind of touch on that in a positive way, that protesters are able for her to open doors. And I think it's done on a negative way as well. So that, I just wanted to make a comment. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Let me ask you all a question. Lauren and Lou, unless you really got something, you're out of this. I want everybody to get a chance, and the other four. Yeah, look, this is like school. Y'all ain't gonna just because y'all sat there without raising your hands. You think I'm just gonna go around you? Come on now, y'all, no. So comments were made when Cannon Hennett was murdered. Yeah, Lou, get yourself. Yeah, you got a second. whatever you drink, going to get to drink, bring us all. If you ain't got enough for the class, okay. When Cannon was, when the 5-year-old was murdered, that justice for Cannon, and there. So what is your thought on, ooh, look at that face. I'm going to start with Maria. What is your thought for what you read and what you saw when people were saying justice for Cannon?
So my immediate thought was there was justice for Cannon because his murderer did not get away with it. So I think that people look for a way just to pull on the coattails of something. You know, it's like, I want to bring attention to this to take attention off of that, but it's not the same thing. The bigger issue is that people of color are being murdered every day. So to holler justice for Cannon, I mean, it's not the same thing because there was justice served, whereas we have somebody who is shot in her sleep for whom justice has not been served. So, you know, I just couldn't get with that. Yes, I feel terrible for the family and the community that was impacted, but it's not the same thing. Don't try to make it the same thing.
Okay. Y'all are agreeing. Matthew, wake up. What are your thoughts on that? And again, I want y'all to be truthful. If y'all disagree. Talk to me. But anyway, Matthew, go ahead.
That was just what Maria was saying is making me think about like the just concept of justice and what are people actually asking for, and the idea of what is possible. You know, with what you really want is to take back time and keep something awful from happening, and for that hurt to go away. And we call the best we can do justice, I guess, you know, under the laws. And and so I thought it was an interesting point that you brought up, Maria, and that distinction of a case that as best we can do is just, but the hurt is still there and the harm is still there. So it becomes it ties into that greater message of other causes. I think it just, this isn't related, well, I guess it's all related, but not directly to your prompt, Juan, but I guess the thing that keeps popping up in my mind is that how it's all about power and people being afraid to lose power, and what do we do if I don't have the power I've always had? People who feel like they don't have power, but there's destruction and protests because a quick way you can have power from fewer numbers is to show, well, this thing that you have, it's mine now, or it's gone now. It's a quick way. Hurt is a quick way to show you to have some semblance of power. Gosh, and so I don't have an into this sentence, but just a lot of threads tying together of you know, people trying to have power, and if you're doing it not violently, it takes a lot more people. It takes a lot clearer message, and that is hard to do, especially with spontaneous protests. And which is, there've been more spontaneity here than the organization that we hear about, read about in the civil rights era. And so I think the way that you can't control someone going in and infiltrating, but a way you can overpower it is by having more people, a clearer message, and just making sure as best you can, this is what we're about, and this is what this means, this movement means. And then it all can get undercut easily because it's a lot sexier to read about some KKK police officer and put that in the news, and that becomes the headline. So yeah, had nothing to do with what you asked, but that's what I'm thinking
It's
about.
okay. You know, it's something you said. You said you have no end to your thought or your sentence. That's okay, because Maria and Lou, I think, would agree with me and say there has been no end to the racism we faced all our lives. So you're fine by not having an end to it, because we don't either. And that's what we want the world to see, is there is no solution. There is no, as Lawrence stated earlier, I can't turn the TV off and racism is gone. Contrary to what people love to say, that I'm race baiting by doing this show. No, this is my everyday. I'm not stirring up something. The pot is already, it gets stirred daily. So your response was a great one, that you don't have an end to it, because there isn't one. There isn't one. Heather, you turn your mic on. You want to say something?
I was assuming I would go next on this.
Oh,
question.
okay. Well, I was going to ask you a different question, but if you want to answer this one, that's fine.
Oh, well, I mean, I 100% agree with Maria. It's different things, right? And you know, I think it's the challenge with you know, some of the messages that are successful in breaking through the noise is that they're wildly simplified. You know, and we are also, everything is in such a mindset of scarcity, right? So for some reason, justice for George Floyd means less justice for other people, right? And so that's why this message of justice for Cannon has come up, because there's this seeming fight for justice for lives, which is ridiculous, right? Justice for George Floyd is about a much bigger systematic issue of there is no justice when a Black man is killed by a police officer, right? It is not about that there's not justice for murder in this country. We have a system for that. And, you know, it's also where we see, in response to Black Lives Matter, we have this response of all lives matter. Like, and Black Lives Matter does not mean that other lives matter less. It just means that we need to focus on ensuring that Black lives matter now. And, you know, even we run the risk with the message of defund the police, because that automatically assumes scarcity in public funding. The much more nuanced solution to that is assume that we have lots of public funding, because I promise you, the money is out there. We could actually refund police so that we invest in implicit bias and anti-racist training for cops, and we could put more money into social services and mental health, and we could provide all these wraparound services so that communities had real responses to people in crisis. Like, and so you run into these two things where, to break through the noise, we have to have these oversimplified messages, and then people hear them without understanding all the systematic issues that are driving them. And on top of that, we layer on this, we are all socialized to believe that there's a scarcity of anything out there, a scarcity of resources. So if one person is getting more, then somebody has to be getting less. And neither of those things are true. Right? Like, and we were talking about the violence of the protests without understanding that for every violent act, there's also a whole community that's hurting, right? And we can't just focus on one. We have to value all the parts of all of these pieces. And so we get stuck in these arguments that are based in things that are completely untrue and can't actually get to the real issues that are not about scarcity and are about systems and are not easily captured in 3 words.
Thank you. Wow, thank you. And we're going to theater in a minute, so y'all just get ready, because we're going into theater. Danny, So you and I are having a discussion. And you are speaking on the violence that happens to Black people from police. And then I look at you and I say, well, what about Black on Black crime? What is your response?
That's also, I really believe that's also been systematically ingrained, you know. If you look at how bigger cities were approached when white people moved in, then they began to flee once the African American community came in, and they were pretty much put into these, they were segregated into these areas, like, this is where you guys are gonna, the government, this is where you guys are gonna live. That's why they built these projects. So it's like, this is your space, you stay here. So I think it's a subset of the systematic racism that's in there. It's like, you guys, you deal with yourselves, and we're gonna be over here enjoying everything else. So I think, yeah, I mean, it's come up before. I have these discussions with my dad. I don't agree with him all of the time. I'm like, what are you talking about? I was like, no, I was like, it's not the same. It's definitely not the same. It's the police are supposed to help. They're there as a resource to the community. I mean, as a child, I was taught, if you are having an issue or you're in danger, you call the police. And why would you call somebody else if you're in danger, if you're not expecting them to help you? That's, so to see, the police commit these crimes just based on race, it's so, I can't even talk. Just.
Okay. All right. I thank you. I appreciate that. I'm going to theater now, but you guys, honestly, you guys are good with your responses. I may be jumping back and forth between the two, but I'm going to theater, but I'm actually kind of going in the back door in a crazy way. Matthew and I did a play called Sweat together, where Matthew played an ex-con and I was his parole officer. And Matthew, I want you to say what's in the script. What did you have to call me? You gotta turn your mic on though, because we can't, my sign language ain't working
Zoom
today.
bleeping me. It was
And I want you to say it.
okay. Well, I had to call you a nigger in it.
And how did you feel about that in rehearsal when you had to say it?
I was not comfortable at all.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's in the script and it's a different character, so there, of course, is an understanding. I mean, we're in to me, theater is a sacred space, and so there's things that happen for the sake of story that are permissible for greater good, and we both have the understanding that it's not Matthew calling Juan a word, so yeah.
Well, and I asked that for a reason. This is for everyone. What are your thoughts on people saying the N-word? And I'm not talking about when they're calling someone the N-word. When you're having an intellectual conversation. And I know it's at least 3 people up here that probably don't want to use that word. But what is your thoughts on the N-word as opposed to nigger? And I'm gonna start with Marie. And there's a reason for me asking you this. Now, this is not a rap song you're listening to, but this is having a conversation. And Maria, I want to start with you.
So just for clarity, you're saying using the phrase the N-word versus actually saying it. Um, well, my first thought is that clearly the word was designed in spite of its original meaning. When it said nowadays, it was designed to cause harm.
Mhm.
And I feel like a person who says the N word know that the ramifications of actually saying it could be very interesting depending upon whom you're talking to. Um, but it doesn't bother me per se if I'm having an intellectual conversation with somebody. It's different if it's being hurled at me, like it has been just walking down the street. It's different. It feels different just because of the intent of it. So it doesn't bother me either way if there's an intellectual conversation going on.
Okay, thank you. Now, I'll tell y'all the reason why I asked this. Lauren, do you think that by using the phrase, the N word, is that softening a blow? Do you think that's making lesser of the effect that the word has on people of color?
I'm not
100%
sure I
sure.
understand
I'm
the
not sure
question.
about what I'm asking. I know what I want to ask,
Yeah.
but I'm trying to ask it without actually saying it.
Spit it out,
So,
Juan. Just spit it
huh?
out.
Yeah, just
I
We
can't really.
don't want
Okay,
to read
so
between the lines.
actually, you
Just
know
say
what? Yeah,
it.
we're gonna go on with theater. I'm gonna say
let's go
this.
there.
I try not to give my opinions. But I don't like to hear people use the N word as a phrase. I'd rather hear someone say that word, because we all know what that word is. But I think that a lot of people that I've heard say, well, racism isn't as bad as it used to be. Then they turn, stand in your face, told it all right there. Then was like, what? And then they are the ones, and I've actually heard these two things said together. Racism isn't as bad as what it used to be because everyone that comes around us, we tell them they can't say that word. If they have to reference it, it's the N word. So you think by using the phrase the N word that makes it better? That I don't hear the redneck trucker riding down the street calling me a nigga? That's no, that doesn't happen. So now I know how I want to ask, what I want to ask. Lauren, have you ever been around anyone that has said that they don't think racism is what it used to be? And did they give you a justification for that?
Oh yeah, of course. Of course. I've been around a lot of well-intended white people who have had no reason or cause to critically examine their whiteness in society, because why would they? I've had a lot of people tell me that racism isn't as bad as it used to be because to be racist, you have to have malicious intent. So a specific example is when I was doing Hairspray. I'll dance around this as best I can because we're live.
Don't dance,
so,
like
okay,
y'all telling me.
The director was a white man in his late 60s, and his way of talking to Black cast members was different than how he talked to white cast members. His way of interacting with the very racially charged storyline of Hairspray, which as a show has a whole host of problems that I don't need to get into, but he said and did things in rehearsal that were racist. And I was bemoaning that to two of my white male castmates. And they were like, how dare you? How dare you say that the director is racist? I can't believe you would say that. I was like, well, he said this racist thing, right? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, then he is racist. He is being racist. And they were like, well, he's old. He doesn't mean it that way. He doesn't know what he's doing. So it's not racist. I was like, I felt like, have y'all seen that meme with Patrick and the manta ray from SpongeBob, where they're like, so it's this, so it's this, so you're right. I felt like that.
Right.
And I feel like that's a really prevalent view as sort of like moderate white people, where it's like, oh, well, I didn't mean any harm by it. I didn't know that was something bad. I didn't know that I didn't know that I wasn't allowed to ask to touch your hair. I didn't know that it was not nice for me to say like, oh, like you're so pretty for a Black woman. Like, I just didn't know. But then like in like the theory of how we communicate with each other, we have this thing called impact versus intent. So just because your intent was not violent, was not to, you know, say these microaggressions, does not mean that your impact was not traumatic. So a lot of white people think racism is done because we aren't lynching people anymore, as if Black people aren't murdered by the police every day. So I think people don't see, people see a lessening of overt racism. They think that that is lessened because there aren't segregated drinking fountains anymore. And so that means it's done. And I just think that that's willfully, maliciously ignorant.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I ain't asking nobody else that one, so sorry, y'all. But that leads me to something that Matthew said and Lauren said. And by the way, I touch Maria's hair often, and so yeah, that's my moment there, and so y'all can call the police on me. I don't care. Y'all can do what y'all want to.
But you asked first. Right? But you asked first.
Sometimes. Anyway, so Matthew said theater is a safe space.
I said sacred space.
Sacred, sorry. Sacred. Well, okay, you know what? I'm gonna change it. Safe space. He didn't say that part, but that's what it took my mind to. And Lauren said that a particular director was being racist in comments. Maria, do you think theater is a safe space?
Personally, I do think it is, just because of the nature of the people that do theater. A lot of us are not status quo per se. You know, we're creative. We're used to stepping outside of the box. So I have found theater to be a safe space where I could express, you know, how I felt and knew it was okay, because I'm in a space of people that were different, not necessarily by skin color, but just either by background, you know, just there's a lot of differences in theater, which I think is what makes it so unifying when people come to our shows. It's a place where everybody can be, typically. You know, of course, there are exceptions to the rule, but I personally think it's a safe space.
Okay, thank you. Danny, do you think there's microaggression in theater?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, not only in theater, but outside of theater as well. And I think, you know, that they can be so subtle that we don't even pick up on them, you know, sometimes. Other times, you know, people, something they say, something they do, you know, triggers you or makes you think, oh, wait, this person is not who I thought they were. So yeah, I do believe that it does exist. Even though, like Maria said, it is a safe space where we all come to tell stories, different narratives. But yeah, I do believe that there are microaggressions within that space.
Okay. Lou, and it's kind of funny because you told me you hadn't done a lot of theater, but you've done enough for me. And yeah, Lou is on a TV on a show on Hulu. Me and him both are, but Lou got some lines. Lou got to speak.
Yeah.
I just say blah, 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 blah. Anyway. So Lou, have you ever been in a performance, play, or recording for television, where you felt that there was prejudiceness against you for any reason? No?
And I've been in, like I said, you alluded to, it's fairly new to me. So I haven't experienced any of that. And I can only lean to what Maria was saying there. For me, it's been really a place where I can really be myself, be around people that are themselves and very creative. And like I said before, when I went in the theater and they were saying, "What's your pronoun?" I was like, "What are they talking about?" You know what I'm saying? Where are they going with that, right? But it was so, once I, learned what they were doing, it was so refreshing to see everybody being who they wanted to be, being creative, getting along. And for me, at this point of my being, it has just been nothing but positive. And right now, I'm like, man, itching to get back in there. Just to be around, positive and good people. So that's my experience right now.
Good.
Right now,
Good.
It's been good for me.
That is great. Well, usually when I upset her, the pronoun that Maria calls me is that. Heather, your experiences in theater, and that's all of them, including where you are now, has it always been obvious with things that were presented to people that it was inclusive of everyone? Okay.
No.
Do you have an example?
Oh, I mean, theater is not, it's part of the broader world. It doesn't get to be its own little bubble that is free from all of these things that we're talking about, and many other things like sexism. So yeah, I've got a lot of experiences. And I mean, isn't part of what we should be learning right now is that to be truly inclusive, you've got to be intentional. I come from the background with lots of training in fight choreography and intimacy choreography. And a huge part of that training is how to be intentional about safety and how to be intentional about understanding the humans that you're working with in a way that is empathetic and also responsive to what safety means to them and inclusion means to them, because those things are different things depending on the people. And it's work to be intentional about being inclusive. You have to work at it. And I think only in the more recent years have we understood that we have to be intentional about it. We saw it with the Me Too movement, and we saw the Chicago theater standards arise, and that was one step in being intentional about creating safe and inclusive spaces. And now we've got more information that our theater spaces are filled with white supremacy culture. And so we've got to be intentional about how do we dismantle that.
Okay, why do you feel that our theater is filled with white supremacy culture?
I mean,
what is, like, I'm an outside person. I came to see, I don't know, I came to see The Wiz at RLT because you did The Wiz, and then I leave. So how do I know that it's, because when I came to see The Wiz, it was Black people on stage, it was Black people in the audience. So what have you seen? What has happened in theater to make you make that statement? When all I've ever seen is, I see that one play a year, which I'm really kind of answering the question, that is with Black people in it. So in my mind, theater is okay. But, you just made that statement. So what happens in theater that you feel like this is basically an all white, all male thing? Because you said sexism too. So yeah.
Well, that's different than present within white supremacy culture.
Okay.
Like saying something is all for white men is very different than being based in a white supremacy culture, right? White supremacy culture, there's characteristics of white supremacy culture. It's things like valuing quantity over quality, or fear of conflict, or hoarding power, or these are characteristics of white supremacy culture. And, those are all things that, we don't necessarily judge those, right? Like, it might be okay to value quantity over quality. It might be like, there's not necessarily judgment placed on those things, but when those are the only things that are valued, and we don't make room for valuing other things, we don't make room for valuing stepping into conflict, or we don't make room for valuing quality, right? Like, we value theater performances because it was successful because it made a lot of money, not it was successful because it changed 3 people's mind on how they felt about something, right? So it's where you place your values. And when values are placed on things that are traditionally part of white culture, then we are not valuing all the other cultures that could come into that space. And, a lot of theater, just the history and the way that we create and we produce theater is built on valuing certain characteristics of one culture. Much of the world is based on valuing a culture that is based in whiteness. And to be a really inclusive space, we have to figure out how we make sure that whatever somebody values walking into a room, that's acknowledged as important. And so that's a very, very different thing than saying a theater only does stories about white men. That's a whole different problem, right? They're related. They're absolutely related. But like this one, that shouldn't be happening anymore, right? That is easy to see that is sexist, that is racist, that is something we can look at and say, that's not okay. This one is the deeper work. And there's many theaters that are producing very diverse shows and casting very diversely. But when we talk about wanting to be an inclusive and welcoming space, yes, we have to do those things, but we've also got to dig at what we're valuing for everyone that walks in that door.
Wow. I started smiling in the middle of your speaking because Lou sent me an instant message that said, I'm voting for Heather. So we don't know what you're running for, but we're casting our ballot for you. That was, yes, that was very well said. And thank you for that.
I just want to comment on what Heather was saying too.
Sure.
What I gathered from it. And when she was talking about the culture, that can go in religion, economics, everything. I mean, theater, entertainment. And so I connected to exactly what Heather was saying there. And so great comment.
Thank you. Yes. Danny, do you get typecast as far as either getting a play or not getting a play? Because there is typecasting in both situations.
Oh yeah, there is, absolutely. I mean, the last play I did, the author specifically was looking for a Latina actress. So I'm not sure if that falls into typecasting, where, you know, the work calls for, you know, a specific ethnicity.
Do you feel, well, let me try this. Do you feel that you only get parts that are for a Latina, Latinx?
No, I don't think so. Mm-mm.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
I don't think I've experienced that a lot of, I guess because technically, you know, my whole name is like, you're Latino, you speak Spanish, you know, it just kind of throws
Right.
people off completely and they're like, what? So
Okay.
I think if you know, you see my name, you might not think in my picture, you're like, I can't, you know, I guess you can't pigeonhole me based on the normal things that people see, so.
Oh, well, yeah, I get it double bad because they see the name and they're like, okay, someone of Spanish descent, and I'm putting it nicely. Oh, some Mexican getting ready to come up in here. And then I walk in and they're like, oh Lord, it's even worse.
No, okay, yeah, I understand.
So I get that. Maria, do you feel like you're typecast? And where were you? Yeah, I'm asking. How you just gonna turn the camera off and disappear on us? Lou asked, could you be excused from the class?
I was tending to my business. Thank you very much.
Next
as long
time
as I came back.
you get a hall pass before you just leave. You're not just gonna up and leave class.
Mr. Isler. Okay, great. I got
Thank you. Go ahead. All right. So now, have you ever been typecast?
No, I have not actually. I've been fortunate to have some great theater experiences, who were quite diverse. So I have not been typecast. I hope
Okay.
I never am.
All right. And this is gonna sound funny. Lauren, have you ever been typecast?
I mean, yeah, but not like as a white lady, just as like an ingenue. Like I feel like I tended for a while to play very similar roles just based on like what people had seen me do before. But in talking to my friends of color, I do hear experiences where, in particular, I have a couple friends who are like Asian or Iranian or Indian, and they have spoken to me about their experience with certain theaters where they get a call once or twice a year because that theater has a Pakistani woman, and that theater only calls my Indian friend when they need her for a specific ethnicity role, and she's not cast in anything else that theater does. And then my other friend has talked about a similar experience, but is frustrated that those roles and those shows that those theaters are producing, he feels like are always like tragedy porn. Like anytime they call him to do a show about a specific ethnicity, it's never like a celebration of his ethnicity. It's always this is such a dark tragedy, and we must highlight all the worst parts and all of the sad things about being this like. So I think that's something that people have talked to me about. That's not something I have experienced as a white lady. I feel like I have gotten to do lots of cool things. I feel like as a woman, I feel like my roles are worse. I just feel like they're more boring. This is not related to race, I'm frequently in shows where men are cast in more interesting roles and they're worse than me, which I always find frustrating. But then speaking specifically with race and typecasting, I was in Bright Star last year and it was cast non-traditionally, and roles that were intended, not verbally, to be white actors were cast as Black actors. And I had a lot of people comment on it. There was a review that was like, I just couldn't get past it. It was a 6-paragraph, I'll harp on this forever. It was a 6-paragraph review, and 3.5 of those paragraphs were talking about how it was irrational for my white character and my partner on stage was Black, was Benaiah Barnes. It was irrational that we would fall in love in the 1940s, and he couldn't get past that to watch the rest of the play. He said it was, I loved the cast, I loved the singing, I loved the set, 2 stars, because it wouldn't make sense for an interracial couple to exist in the 40s. I was like, buddy, it's theater, dude. You can believe that I'm gonna like start singing my feelings, and you're gonna believe that we're like sitting on these chairs and like bouncing and we're on a train, but like you can't get past this one thing. Get over it. That really rubbed me the wrong way. So I'm glad to hear Danny and Maria's experiences, that you don't feel like you've been typecast. Like, I'm surprised by that, but I'm also like really excited for you for that. But I definitely think, based on who I have talked to and my experience in these shows, that it's a big problem.
Okay, thank you. I'm reading something that Shonda wrote, and I think it was when you were talking, Heather. She said value of linear time, and she put 3 dots on it. Do you know what she's talking about, Heather? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of the characteristics of white supremacy culture is valuing timeliness, which is
Value of linear time. Okay. Shonda, you know I'm special. I don't know everything. I think it's Maria, your mic is off for a good reason. I think, Lauren, something you just said, it's kind of funny to me because there were interracial couples in the 40s. Right. They may not have been well known.
I know.
But they were there. I wish I had read this. I would have made a comment under a pseudonym email address. We're not going to talk about that, though.
Well, what was funny is I posted about it on Facebook, and a number of people commented, and some like well-intending friends of mine, white and Black, were like, yeah, I struggled with that too. I was watching the show and I was like, that's odd. Like, why are they not addressing this? And it sparked this whole conversation of like, can we really cast shows like completely colorblind? Or does that inherently change what it is? And a lot of like more old school people were like, you know, like, I'm woke, but you know, I think that fundamentally changes some aspect of the play. And I'm like, so we only cast white people in every show written before the year 2005, basically? Like, I don't think that's the answer either.
Well, something you said earlier, and you put it in quotes, non-traditional. I only hear that generally when a Black person is put into something that usually had no Black people before. So Matthew, does non-traditional mean, what is your meaning of the word? What is your definition of non-traditional?
I mean, I think it can mean a bunch of different things, but I mean, I don't walk around with a definition of it. I know Equity has a definition of it, and I don't know their exact definition off the top of my head right now. But
well, what is your thought of non-traditional, as Lauren said it? What do you think that means?
I mean, it can be playing, casting against the race that is either assumed or prescribed in a script. It can be against gender. It can be against age, like Ian McKellen playing Hamlet at age 192, and you know, so non-traditional it can take very different forms. And I think the best theater is theater where that non-traditional is a choice of what are we saying. I think it's very important to know, what are we saying? What are we trying to say with our casting, traditional or non-traditional? And I think sometimes, and so it was for the Bright Star situation. I think it sounded like it was very intentional in that casting. And I think you have to be cognizant of what the message is that you're saying. And so I think some people would see the show and that not predominate the story. And then some people it does. And as much as theater makers, I think it is our responsibility to know, what are we saying? And because everyone on stage, everyone who works on a show, everything that we put on stage for the audience to see is a symbol of a story. And symbols are shapeshifters. And so they mean different things to different people. And so I think you just have to be cognizant of the power of it as best you can. So, but non-traditional, it can mean all sorts of different things, but typically an assumed, I think there's like an assumed casting and then going against that assumption.
Okay. In the Heights, there's a video with a high school all-white cast whose use of rhythm is Lord have mercy.
That was well put. That was very polite.
Thank you. So, is that okay to do?
No.
Heather, I was gonna call one person, but I got nope from like 3 people. So that's not okay to do, but is it okay? So then if that's not okay to do, then why would I go out for a part in a Shakespeare play? Because that's traditionally been white. Because obviously in the Heights, you're going to try to stick to tradition, but I don't think it necessarily says that in the script for all places. Like The Wiz, it doesn't say they have to be Black, but come on. If you're doing it with a white cast, it's The Wizard of Oz. So as Shonda told me in our very first show. So, and there is a German version of The Wiz. I think it's German. Anyway, they were speaking English, but it was an all white cast for The Wiz. And I'm like, yeah, no, you might be singing the songs of The Wiz, but no, this is The Wizard of Oz. So as someone who's auditioning, if you telling me it wasn't okay to do all those white people in the Heights, then why would I audition for Shakespeare? Lauren, since you were the first one to speak up, why would I audition? Because apparently you're casting in a certain way.
Heard, yes. I think, so like in my ideal world, all stories, all ethnicities, all backgrounds are represented on stage, and people of any race can find a role that is meaningful to them, that, makes sense with their ethnicity. I guess that's not my ideal world, but like my ideal world, all stories are being told and people feel like they are being represented. I think the difference between you auditioning for Shakespeare and me auditioning for In the Heights is In the Heights is a story that is centered on race, is centered on the experience of a particular group of people in a particular place in a particular time that I cannot understand as a white person. And it is disingenuous for me to present as if I understand that. Hamlet is not about him being a white guy. If Hamlet's big speech was to be or not to be, I'm really glad I'm a white guy, I love my privilege and I love walking through the world with my whiteness, then yes, you shouldn't audition for Hamlet, because as a Black man, you don't, that experience doesn't make sense for you, and it would be disingenuous for you to present that. But I think it's this, like going back to Heather talking about the pervasiveness of white supremacy, the pervasiveness of just like centering whiteness. So I'm about to get tangenty, but like we assume like white male stories are the standard. And so we all have to slot into that. And so that's not ideal. But if those are the plays that are going to be produced, then I think those should be populated by people, not just white men. So I think if those are the stories that are going to be produced, everybody should have a shot. But ideally, we produce stories that speak to everyone's experience. But just stop casting white people in the Heights. Oh my God. No, thank you.
Heather, I may have forgotten my question because Lauren is crazy. Like I'm like my train of thought. She's like,
But she's right.
no, thank you. She's like, no, thank you. Dog, and I did. She made me lose my train of thought that quickly. God, what was it? It was about dog. It was good too. Tag on it. Well, you know what? I want to say this. Oh no. Oh, okay. Heather, what did you think of the when George Floyd first happened? The expressions that the theater companies made.
I'll be really honest with my experience. You know, because Raleigh Little Theater, we issued a statement, and then we heard from members of our community that our statement was hurtful to some in our community. And that was hard for us to hear, of course. We did not want to hurt anyone in our community. Our intent was, of course, to support Black members of our community, but we didn't do that. And, you know, I got a phone call, and it was hard to hear that phone call, but I also later realized what a gift that phone call was, because it gave me the opportunity to learn, to grow, and to do better. And so we issued then a second statement that was more thoughtful, that brought more people into the conversation to understand if it was the right statement to make. And we have now, I'm not sure that a day has gone by here at Raleigh Little Theater that we haven't talked about the work that we're doing now, about how do we continue to get better. And, you know, it's hard. It's deep work. It's personal work. It's sometimes infuriatingly slow work. Because of the number of things that we have to think through. It's not just about producing seasons that are more diverse stories and ensuring that we have diverse casts. It is ingrained in every part of our operations. It is combing through our HR policies. It is examining the vendors that we work with. It is understanding the community relationships that we have, and it is being really intentional about the space that we hold. And so I think any theater company that issued a statement in order to be responsive to that moment that was happening and didn't continue the work after that statement, that's not okay. That's not the start, nor it's certainly not the end of that conversation. But any theater company that made a statement, whatever it is, if they have truly committed and they are truly changing and working on it, then that's the best we can do. And, you know, the best that we can do is going to also be continuing to fail, because we're going to get it wrong. We got it wrong that time. We're going to get it wrong again. But I learned so much in that failure, and it gave me the opportunity to do better. And that's what we got to keep working towards.
Okay. Thank you for that. Really, thank you. So much for that. I lost it again. But Heather for president. I'm just saying. I'm just there. Yes, raise the roof. Oh, it was for you, Maria, because I don't like you. Y'all can't. Heather was about to make me emotional. That's what it was. Y'all know I am. Y'all know I cry in a heartbeat. You know.
Waterhead.
Watch your mouth. Now, Shonda put up here CP time. I don't even. And that was, I guess, the counterpoint to linear time. And then my mom put up there about the linear since time began. I don't know what they're doing on the chat, y'all. We're gonna leave them be. What was it, Maria? Something Heather said about getting it right. I don't know. Let me go on to something else.
Juan, can I just say something about?
Yes.
Because I did make a comment on the actual Facebook post, and then people came at me.
Oh yeah, you come back at them. You got a platform now.
Don't come for me unless I called for you. I was like, no, you did not. So basically, when I saw the video, basically my post was like, no. I was like, you are not allowed to do this in a full, I was like, white cast, because I was like, you are not an immigrant. I was like, you have not walked a minute in my shoes and gone through all the different struggles and different stories that make up my story. So to me, I was like, why did the director allow this to happen when, I was reading a study the other day where it says like 98% of Broadway audiences are white and only 2% are people of color who are actually on the stage. So it's like we're not even represented in cast. So I'm like, why are you gonna take this show that is completely, it tells the immigrant story and not cast it with people who are of Latino or can,
Okay, well, Danny, you're not talking to Juan right now. Okay, Danny, but that's what we have dramaturgs for. So we can research about your culture and stuff. So why can't we do it?
I just think it loses the authenticity of the story of what the author, the creator was intending for you to see as the story.
Okay. But you guys do our plays, and right now you're talking to a white man. You guys do our plays, so why can't?
I just think it undermines the story for that. I mean, for that particular In the Heights, just because it's one of the few Latino play musicals out there. There's a brethren of completely, repertoire for Broadway musicals for you to do. It's like, why did you have to pick that one?
Okay. All right. Thank you. Maria, do you think a white director should direct a Black play?
I think it's doable. Just as far as the play is made by the actors. Yes, the director has to lead them, but the soul, the juice, the umph of the play is done by the actors. So I definitely think that if the director knows the script well, I think they can bring something to life as far as taking it from paper to putting it on stage. But I think the weight of it falls on the cast regardless. So I totally think it's doable.
Okay, thank you. Last question for Matthew. So it's been said that I need to stop doing this show. Now, this was before the recent shooting. And it was said like, I need to stop doing it because I'm beating a dead, I'm making a mountain out of a molehill. Your thoughts on that?
I mean, I wouldn't call it a mountain out of a molehill. We've got a little bit bigger than a molehill going on. And I think conversations are great. And I would ask that person, like, what does it hurt to have these conversations, and where that resistance, or how they perceive this particular conversation and what happens from it, and where the resistance to that conversation happening is. Because what they perceive coming from it may be different than what you perceive coming from it, and maybe that's where the misunderstanding is. Personally, I think it's good to. I mean, I know what you want and what you are achieving through this, and I think that's a good thing.
Okay, thank you. Any final thoughts, anybody? Yes,
I just wanna
Maria
say
want to answer
something.
that question. Go ahead. Come
I
on with it.
do, because I am an advocate for this platform. I think that it is completely necessary. Like, you can't fix what you can't face. So if you can't talk about it, then I mean, everything is going to stay under the rug, which now is nearly impossible because the world's eyes are on this situation right now. And so if we as theater don't address it, then a major part of our community is just going to miss it. And there's nobody else doing this that I can tell, especially in our area. So when you bring all of us with our diversity together, it's an eye-opening experience. We don't always agree, which we don't have to agree all the time, but I think it's necessary to have the conversation. You just happen to be the one to get beat up for it. That's all I got to say.
And y'all know me. Y'all know I can take it, so I ain't no. So, any final thoughts, Danny?
No, I just want to, like Maria said, I just want to thank you for having this space, the safe space and platform where you can bring different people together, and we can talk about what's going on in the world, and how it affects us, and how we think we can change it and make it better.
Okay, Heather.
Stop harming Black bodies.
Okay, there it is. Lauren.
I think the only way to learn, the only way to become kinder, more empathetic people is to talk to each other. So much of the ignorance and fear that is so pervasive in certain white demographics in this country is because they just don't know a Black person, don't have conversations with people that are different than them. They live in this homogenous culture. And like I think Matthew was saying earlier, fear is such a good motivator. Fear is such a good way to bind people to your cause. And so there are people in communities that are homogenous that have never spoken to people outside of their culture, and the people in power in their culture use fear of the other as a tactic to keep them compliant. So I cherish being able to speak to people whose lives are different than mine, because I think every time someone tells me their experience, I become a better, more empathetic person. And I learn something new, and I learn something that I can do to walk through the world more gently and lovingly. And that's my goal, is to do no harm and to help other people and make other people have happy, pleasant lives. And that becomes easier when people tell me what hurts them. If I do things that hurt their feelings, how could I know if you didn't tell me? Or if I didn't go research it myself? So thank you for creating this space for us. I really appreciate it. And also fuck those people that said to stop doing it.
And thank you for that one too. Matthew, yes, final words. Hey, that's my Lauren right there.
I think I don't feel like I have anything profound enough to conclude this, but the idea of leaning into the discomfort is important, and is difficult, and it's scary. Kind of what Heather was talking about, like being wrong, and then going forward knowing you're going to be wrong. I catch myself often not doing things because I don't want to be perceived as doing something hurtful. And so I wonder how many learning opportunities I've missed by not doing that. I've felt myself grow during this time today, but also during, all this time. But and I wasn't someone I would consider, oppressive or, before. But, that's the thing of just knowing that none of us has got it right. And we're all have our blind spots, and we're all in our zones. And some are closer to where I think we all hope to be than others. And so that's to speak to an earlier question of, are we less racist now than we were before, is I would say absolutely. And because I can measure that in myself, being, if the only change that's happened in the world is me, Matthew Hager, how I was 6 months ago, and even if it's just small incremental changes in how I feel I understand situations differently, or another person's life better, then that's an example of less racist. But we're not there yet, and so it's the difficulty in saying, because we're less doesn't mean that we've arrived, and this is still not acceptable, but it is better. It's in the right direction, and there's steps back and there's steps forward and all that. But I want to thank Maria for at the beginning of saying, you're not hopeless. And I realized how hopeless I sounded in my first response. And I don't want that to be like what I put out, the primary thing I put into the world. And so it's difficult situations because it's uncomfortable. And also it's growing, and it's moving forward, and
okay. All right. Matthew's looking for the end, y'all. He's looking for the end.
There's just so much to say. I would love to come back and have more conversation about casting and who can do what shows and all that. I think that's
Danny, tell him I love folk that want to come back. I love it. Yes, you will be on the comeback list. Definitely. Yes, you will too. Yes, everyone. Maria, your final thoughts. You ain't coming back.
No, I'm not coming back.
Whatever. Y'all, Maria looks at the show every week. She knows more about this show than probably I do. So
I'm a fan. I'm telling you, I believe in it. I believe in what you're doing. So we need it. We need it.
And I'm gonna let y'all go because it's past Maria's bedtime. It's not easy. I'll put it that way. But Maria, did you have final thoughts, or have you given them already?
I'm done.
You're done. Okay. Well, she's done. Oh, what the world? Let me see. Hold on. Oh, all right. Well, can you guys see?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You see my folder?
Yep. See your folder.
Okay. All right. Shoot, I didn't get a chance. Why am I not hearing it? Oh, that's why. Let's start it over.
Wow. You are broken. Shit, you shot that guy in the stomach. Shit, people are getting shot all around us. People are just getting shot everywhere, guys. Move. Take it. Take it. Take it. Move. Right there, we're coming out to you. You got to remember again. Yeah. We're coming out to you. Fuck.
We got a lot of work to do. A lot of work. You guys have a good night. And if you want to talk, give me a call. I hate to leave you like that, but that's the end that you don't get, Matthew, if you're Black. Good night, guys.